Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I take the floor tonight with many of my colleagues to fight back against an attack on the rule of law and our democratic institutions. Right now, the investigations into Donald Trump and the prior investigation into Hillary Clinton have been infected with the virus of severe bias. Hillary Clinton went under investigation for the mishandling of classified information, and also her dealings through the Clinton Foundation was essentially investigated by her own fan club. Meanwhile, Robert Mueller obtained his team by fishing in the Never Trump aquarium. Only through the antidote of transparency can we end this erosion of the rule of law, and can we restore the American people's confidence in the institutions that we must trust to live in a civilized society. The people in this country have a right to know what has happened within the FBI, the Department of Justice, and within Robert Mueller's team as he probes the President and his transition. But there is so much in hearing after hearing that members of the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee and the Oversight Committee have been told we don't have a right to know as the representatives of the people. Let's begin with the tarmac meeting between Loretta Lynch and former President Bill Clinton. We as the American people apparently don't have a right to know what was truly discussed. In information and reports that have been submitted to the Congress, there is extensive redacted information where we don't get to see the substance of those communications between Loretta Lynch and former President Bill Clinton. It's deeply troubling. We also don't get to know what the informant would tell us who had information about Russia's attempts to impair the United States' uranium assets through the now infamous Uranium One deal. We know that there was an informant. We know that that informant wanted to come forward and give information about bribery and kickbacks that undermined America's interests. But unfortunately, people with the Justice Department that still remain in substantial positions of power went and sought a gag order so that the Congress wouldn't learn what was happening and so the American people wouldn't learn what was happening. Then we learn that an inspector general who wanted to raise the flag of concern regarding the deeply troubling conduct of Hillary Clinton was essentially shut down. Mr. McCullough has now given interviews upon his departure from the intelligence community indicating that he went to James Clapper. He said that these mishaps, these potential violations of the law were serious and that they put America's national security in jeopardy. What he heard back from Mr. Clapper was that these revelations would create heartburn for the Clinton campaign. It is ludicrous when we've got potential bribes and kickbacks, when we've got the Clinton Foundation functioning as essentially a pass-through money laundering operation, that we wouldn't have all of the information that an inspector general would bring forward. Mr. McCullough gave interviews where now he said that his family, his job, his agency, his mission was threatened by people in the deep state. That is not the America we need to live in. Transparency is the antidote to this type of corruption and this type of truly intolerable conduct. Here's what we do know. We do know that the Democratic National Committee was off paying for a salacious and false dossier from the Fusion GPS company about the current president, Donald Trump. We don't know whether or not the FBI contributed funds toward that cause. I mean, think about that for a moment. When we asked the Attorney General and the FBI Director, were taxpayer funds used to go and obtain a dossier to discredit the president both before and after his election, we were told we didn't have a right to know, and that the taxpayers don't have a right to know if their money was used in this way. It's troubling. We also know that Nellie Orr, the wife of a top Department of Justice official, Bruce Orr, was actually getting paid by Fusion GPS, the company that ultimately produced this false dossier. If that's not a conflict of interest, if that doesn't impair the credibility of this investigation, I don't know what does. We also don't know who's in charge. We asked questions to the Attorney General regarding the nature of his recusal. Can the Attorney General appoint a second special counsel to evaluate the Clinton Foundation? We got contradictory answers. So as we prepare for the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein's testimony before the Judiciary Committee tomorrow. We don't know if it's Mr. Rosenstein that can appoint a second special counsel. We don't know if it's the Attorney General that has the power to do that. We do know that the American people want it. Harvard University released a poll that said over 60% of the American people believe there should be a second special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, largely as a consequence of this intractable bias that we continue to see in the intelligence community. So let's look at that bias as it is applied to Mr. Mueller and his team. We have no idea how Bob Mueller picked the members of his team. I asked the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, did people get on the Mueller team because they hate President Trump? Was there any vetting? Was there any review? Did we look at political contributions, political activity, or activism from these folks? And the FBI Director would not answer my question. And so here we are, unclear as to whether or not the standard to investigate the president was a pre-existing bias against him. And Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that it's a coincidence that the Mueller team is populated by people who bring that bias with them and who seemingly have acted upon it. Mr. Weissman, who's Mueller's number 2, he attended Hillary Clinton's election night party. Are you really telling me that we couldn't find a number 2 in the Mueller investigation that wasn't at Hillary Clinton's election night party? For goodness sakes. We also know that Mr. Weissman sent emails to Sally Yates praising her for directly defying an order from the President of the United States. That should have disqualified Mr. Weissman, but we don't know if that was in fact the qualifying factor that led him to be on this team. Aaron Zebley, he's also a member of the Mueller team. He represented Justin Cooper, who set up the Hillary Clinton email server. Could we not have found people for the Mueller team that weren't involved in setting up an email server for Hillary Clinton, for goodness sakes? He also used a hammer to smash BlackBerries, destroying evidence. Heck, Mr. Zebley may be a witness, and yet he's on the Mueller team. Jeannie Ray, she defended the Clinton Foundation against FOIA requests and now is involved in persecuting the president. In fact, over half of the members of the Mueller team have financially contributed to the campaigns of Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or both, and none of them contributed to Donald Trump. I don't think it's a coincidence, and I think it's ridiculous that the Congress doesn't have any information about how these people were selected, how they were vetted, how they were approved. But it's not just the Mueller team. It's also the Department of Justice. Bruce Orr, the head of counterintelligence, he meets with Christopher Steele, who is the author of the dossier, during the campaign. And then after the campaign, he meets with Glenn Simpson. All the while, Bruce Orr, working at the Department of Justice, has a spouse getting paid by the very people developing these lies about the president to discredit him. It is smoking gun evidence of bias and conflict of interest. But it's not just the Mueller team in the Department of Justice, it's also the FBI. Andrew McCabe is the current Deputy Director of the FBI. When he was the assistant agent in charge of the Washington field office, he was sending out emails just weeks before the 2016 election saying that the Hillary Clinton investigation would be given special status, that it would be handled by a small team at headquarters. So what that means is that Hillary Clinton got different treatment than any other American that would have been charged with the mishandling of classified information in the Washington, D.C. area. Absolutely outrageous. That special treatment didn't lead to a more rigorous review. Heck, we know now that James Comey was drafting the exoneration statement before even interviewing key witnesses, including Hillary Clinton herself. And then you've got Peter Strzok, also at the FBI. Mr. Strzok has now been discredited and demoted because he was sending 10,000 text messages back and forth with his mistress about how much he loved Hillary Clinton and hated President Trump. I don't think it's a coincidence that Mr. Strzok is the person who went in and changed the term grossly negligent, which is a crime, to extremely careless in the exoneration statement about Hillary Clinton. The Attorney General needs to do his job. He needs to appoint a special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton because she was never investigated in earnest in the first place. And he needs to tell Robert Mueller to put up or shut up. If there's evidence of collusion, let's see it. We're almost a year into this investigation, and the only thing I see is a bias that continues to erode our institutions and our rule of law, and this Congress should stand for it no more. And at this time, I'm proud to yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry, such time